Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
And inspire you to do even greater things.
Before we jump into today's conversation, a special thanks to PM Power Consulting for encouraging and supporting this show right from the start. With over 1,000 person-years of collective experience, PM Power has helped many organizations, teams, and individuals chart out their own journeys of excellence and make progress. Thank you, PM Power. Now, let's move to today's episode. My guest today is Ian Hogg, the Chairman of SolvedBy.ai, an applied AI company helping SaaS vendors embed enterprise-grade forecasting, demand, and decision intelligence directly into their platforms. In this conversation, Ian shares his background from the Royal Navy and Xerox to building early web businesses, a SaaS platform, and an AI-focused company. He describes how his SaaS business began by solving his own operational problem and then expanded when others in the industry recognized the same need. He shares how, in enterprise AI, one needs to distinguish decision support and forecasting systems from generative AI solutions. Ian highlights that AI adoption in organizations depends heavily on leadership behavior. The conversation also covers mindset barriers, the empowerment of non-technical users, and the need to build confidence through hands-on experimentation rather than waiting for formal permission or perfect readiness. On branding and customer acceptance, Ian explains that people may resist AI if it feels like a replacement, but respond more positively when it is framed as assistive and human in the loop. He shares career advice for both newcomers and mid-career professionals. In closing, he shares aspects that help him stay grounded. Listen on. Yeah. Hi, and welcome to the Software People Stories.
Hi, Shiv. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. When I first read your mail and saw all the things that you've done, I was not sure if our standard format of about 45 minutes to an hour would be sufficient. But let's see how we can unpack this. So we can start with your origin story, your self-introduction, how you got into or associated with IT and the things that you've been doing, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah. Well, so I'm a Londoner. I've lived in England all my life, and I was in the Royal Navy, and I left when I was about 30. And I got a job with Xerox, and I ended up basically selling software. And I was fairly cocky and arrogant, and I thought to myself, I can do this myself. And I went off and got involved in a number of businesses. And I suppose I would describe myself as I'm not a trained engineer, but I'm a good vibe coder. I've got a GitLab account. I build applications using tools really. So I decided that I was going to build a web agency in about 1994. So my first browser was Mosaic. I always say I was in it before Bill Gates, before Internet Explorer, and we were building websites, and we were, but we're not really making much money at it. I was better at being at product than I was at business at that stage. And one of the things we did get involved in was we tried to build basically a horse race betting site. We thought that was going to be a good application for industry. And that eventually went on to become, I was a joint founder, if you like, with a couple of other guys, where we managed to acquire the rights for all of UK horse racing in a project called At the Races. We raised about £100 million. And we launched what we believe was the first website where we were streaming video. So we were streaming live video of horse racing, and people could only access it by a dial-up modem, like 14.4 kbs. It was like
I
a
remember that.
PowerPoint presentation, one frame at a time as the horses went round the track. But we then launched a television channel, and that television channel still exists. It's now called Sky Racing, and the business was called Out the Races. And after that, I went on and I worked for another technology company, and then I started a SaaS platform, which and I scoped out and pretty much designed the application myself, but got other people to build it. And then since then, my current business is still that same SaaS platform, but I've got another business called SolvedBy.ai with my son and a few other people, and that sort of provides an AI layer to SaaS businesses. And that's it. And that's how I've ended up here.
Yeah, wonderful. So from being with Xerox and then being on the sales side, now how did you identify the problems to solve?
It's a good question. I think I've always had a sort of an engineering mindset. I was a good problem solver in the Navy. That helped teach me, and I think that's it. I'm inquisitive. I spot problems and I solve them, which I think is where I would say product and where I think I've got reasonably good product strengths. So yeah, I just learned by speaking to customers what their problems were. Then thinking, I could solve those. And quite often back in the day, the software wasn't able to solve it. So you were told to sell pretty much what was available rather than a solution to the problem, So
Yeah.
you were trying to steer people to what your software was rather than to the solution. Whereas now, with AIs, you can, and other tools, you can pretty much take them straight to the solution. So I remember being a little bit frustrated and thinking, that's not what the customer actually wants here, and you ended up selling them, not mis-selling, but you're trying to shoehorn a problem into a solution rather than solve the problem, And I like I say, I feel I'm a problem solver, and actually that we ended up starting to build websites because that seemed to be a really flexible way to solve some problems. Technology wasn't quite there with our ambition early on, but that's how the web got built, really, isn't it?
Mm. Yeah, so this problem solving, whether it is building websites or even listening to customers, is probably, but I'm probably making some assumptions here, is about solving a particular individual's need. Whereas when you say a SaaS platform, that's something that you would have to cater to different users. There may be different adaptations or different flavors that are needed. So how did that shift in thinking happen?
So what happened? So with the SaaS platform, because I'm nothing if not entrepreneurial, Shiv. So I happen to have a chain of retail shops and in London, and we were too small to deal with like the large American software providers that provided like staff scheduling software.
Okay.
So, but we had this problem, which was, people were emailing me there or emailing, the head office, if you like, the staff rotas. This is who worked, this is who swapped, this is who was ill, and you couldn't make head nor tail of it. It was printed out, it was scribbled on, and therefore we struggled to pay people accurately. We couldn't buy a solution at the time, so we decided to build one. So I got some support, scoped it out, and built it. So really, I was my own first customer, if you like. And then we went on and went to a few other companies that we were sort of friendly with, competitors, but we sort of knew them from the industry forums and things like that. And they said, "Oh, this is exactly what we need as well." And then before you know it, you've got a business. So I think, and carrying on with the problem solving, is we've always felt that we were customer driven developers. So if products come up, and I get it, there are limits to what customers can suggest, because sometimes even the best customers have the odd crazy idea. But so do product as well. Products think, oh, well, this is great, we should build this, and everybody's going to want it, and then nobody wants it. So I've always lent on if the customer's got if you can get the problem off a customer, then use your knowledge to come up with the solution rather than let the customer solve the problem entirely. Then that's a reasonably happy medium.
So the next stage is once you've identified and scoped the problem, how do you communicate this to the development team?
Well, I could give a really boring answer about Jira and Confluence, couldn't I? It's and I think probably that is the biggest challenge that I face, because so if I look back at the journey of us as a software business, when we started, it was probably me and one other guy that were just speaking to one or two developers, and it was quick and easy, and that we didn't have too much process. Then you go through a phase where there's more process comes in, and you can't scale me more than one. So, and that's where it starts to fall over. And before you sort of discover Scrum Masters and product owners and all sort of what as a startup, and a bootstrap startup look like expensive overheads. I'm prepared to admit that we were a little bit late in adding some of those people into the team. But then once we did, it comes down to, just good quality management, really. You've just got to, keep speaking to the customers. I think, again, I think where some software companies have struggled with the right word, but have not done themselves justice, is they don't invest enough in customer success. So I'd like to think my customers, well, they all know me. They all know my customer success people. They know the other founders. And we still like to do FaceTime with them regularly. And I always call it fronting up. Like, software is not easy, but you do come across software companies where they don't front up to the problem. They back away from it. So I think in terms of understanding the problems, if you front up and listen, you can't always solve them quickly. That the resource delivery challenge hits everybody. But yeah, it's the communication starts with speaking to the customers, and then having decent processes and the right product and Scrum Masters and the rest to get it delivered.
So from 92 to now, what have you seen as changes to the whole process of listening to the customer and delivering them a solution?
Well, if you actually, there's a better, from 92 to sort of 96, 97, it was, all on prem. It was pre-internet. Then there was the whole internet, which was crazy for a few years, and then it sort of settled down, really. Then we had sort of Web 2.0, and that's gone on for 15, 20 years, Web 2.0. And then it literally, for me, the last 6 months have just rechanged it again. The development and problem solving landscape. So our AI business, we've been in it since 2019, 2020. So we felt we were early adopters, but we were doing fairly sort of, we called them narrow AIs at the time, because they were, that's a phrase that's gone out of fashion, but they're very sector focused, vertical, unique problem solving, machine learning tools, really. In the last 5 or 6 months, probably since, and I'm not, you can hear this on lots of podcasts, since about December, the sort of agentic AI has arrived properly. Vibe coding is a real thing, whereas before, it was pushing out some stuff that we weren't always proud of. And now I think that where it's changing is, I think the product people, have got a real opportunity, because they can use these vibe coding tools to build build products. Whereas sometimes I feel that developers, there's the saying where if you've got a good developer and give them AI, they become a great developer. And if you get a great developer and give them AI, they're pretty much superhuman. That's true if they've got a vision for what they're building. Okay, so therefore you need a great developer has to have a good vision for what they want to output. Okay, which puts them to me in the products bucket, if you like. And likewise, if you've got a really good product person who can envisage a good solution, and then you give them the tools to just vibe code it, that's where I think the magic is starting to happen. And I think to go back to your question, 1992 to 2025 Q4, it was a fairly slow pace, long, steady, continuous progress. The last 6 months have just been amazing, really.
I think now we are in the midst of all this AI. So what has been your experience of using these techniques and also the engines for analytics or the generative solutions in the enterprise? The reason I'm asking this question is there is an expectation of repeatability, predictability, as well as traceability, and all those kinds of things. Whereas with the generative solutions, there is always this possibility that it's not exactly repeatable.
Yeah, I agree. So for our company, we're supplying most of our businesses, but through partners. So we provide AI engines that embed into SaaS platforms. And so it's like a decision layer. So they tend to be, they don't tend to hallucinate, but they're optimization engines. So they're not LLMs. They're more like constraints programs or machine learning. So they are forecasting engines. Okay. So here's the thing: is if the old way of forecasting was 95% accurate, the AI is 98% accurate. It's a better forecast. It can't ever be 100% accurate because that would be, hindsight. It's like optimizing staff schedules. For optimizing staff schedules, there's quite often not a perfect solution that meets all the objectives, keeps everybody happy, meets all the working time criteria, things like that. So you can only build the optimum version. And if you're close to optimum and the previous version of using a spreadsheet is suboptimal, then the AI was better. So I think AI, the area we're in, we don't build LLMs. We're not building tools that hallucinate or that are trying to make decisions that people are 100% relying on. They're making decision supporting engines where you're giving them the best possible decision layer. So we from our point of view, we don't see that as that's not hurting us or challenging. As a business where we are implementing it in our own business, or I'm speaking to colleagues or partners where they're implementing it, you have to pick what battles you fight. So people aren't going to let an LLM run the payroll because the payroll has to be 100% accurate, and any hallucination is going to stop it. So if you look at SaaS platforms, payroll is probably the most defensible against AI. And I'm sure people it may be nuclear power station control systems, that those sort of tools are very defensive about AI. And but stuff that is like a simple forecasting tool is going to be completely undefensible because it doesn't have to be 100% accurate; it just has to be better.
Right. But when you're talking about algorithms and decision support and so on, how do you ensure that the data that is used is good?
Fine. So this is well above my pay grade because we've got a whole team that look after this. But basically, when the data, so we connect up to partners via API, and then those partners might have hundreds of customers that are sending forecast data through for us to predict everything from coffee sales to, I mean, how many bananas are going to be sold in the supermarket. So we get a wide range of data. You have to build tools that cleanse the data, deal with anomalies. So for instance, we had we were doing some work with a customer where they'd had a hack. Okay, into a UK retailer, they'd been hacked, and their ordering system had gone to pot, and they were having to do all the inventory management manually. So they were running out of things like, I don't know, strawberries, or whatever they were running out of. So when you got the forecast data, that anomaly was in there, and you couldn't rely on that historical data to create a forecast because that wasn't the true demand for how many strawberries or other fruit you were going to sell because they hadn't ordered enough. So, so you need anomaly detection in there, and you need cleansing tools in there to sort of, you need gap fillers as well. So, quite often not all data comes through. You can't not deliver a forecast because that hasn't come through. So pretty much, if a lot of the work we do, I'd say 50% of it is data science, worrying about which model to use to get the best outcome and how to model the forecast, and 50% is data engineering, moving data in, cleaning it, building AIs. It's that's why ML ops is a big thing.
Yeah. And talking of data, particularly in Europe, with all the privacy and the other considerations, as well as even in the other LLM kind of space of AI, there seems to be a shift moving back to on-prem. How does that impact SaaS solutions or SaaS organizations?
Yeah, I think it is hard to navigate those data. GDPR was tough enough, but with SaaS, it was like, as long as it was in the European Union, there were ways to manage it, and you had to get good if you were using. We used a team in Pakistan, another one in Vietnam. So that customer data can't go outside the European Economic Area. So you have to get good at using test data and non-customer data and non-production systems, things like that. But what's happening with we've just recently been we're constantly approving tools internally where somebody says, "Oh, I've got this new AI tool I want to use. Can I use it?" Like for instance, OpenAI just launched Codex app, or version 2 of it. So we wanted people to download it onto their MacBooks. And then you have to, we've already got approved ChatGPT, okay, because we've got a enterprise version where we know where the data is and we know that the data is not used for training, and then we've got policies for it. But when you use another OpenAI policy product like tokens or Codex, you then have to go and find out whether that's compliant with the same rules, okay? And then you get things like we use Jira, and Jira's got a partnership with OpenAI. So I'm not picking on OpenAI. I'm just saying how many places they touch different systems. So we use Rovo in Jira to do some analysis. You have to then find out whether the Rovo is using OpenAI tokens, where those tokens are subject to the same, the processing is not used for training, and the data is all held in the European Union, and it becomes a nightmare. And we are struggling to sort of review and onboard all of the tools that people want to use. Okay, so but at the same time, we want to encourage people to use these tools. So I think it's a good question, Shiv, and we don't have 100% have the answer, and that's why people are starting to go on premise, but even then, I've got a little Mac Mini, like everybody, I've got my Mac Mini and my OpenClaw. That's on premise, but it's connected to the internet, powered by an agent that I've had to give its own email domain. I'm sure we don't have to have an open claw security risk conversation here, but there are people that have put stuff on that Mac Mini, and it's gone all over the world. So on premise, it has its challenges if you want to take advantage of the latest tools, because once you put those tools on, it might as well be in the cloud.
Yeah. But do you see this coming back to the cloud, or is this trend of on-prem going to grow?
Really good question. I think that the cloud's still got a lot of legs in it yet, because particularly where you're doing stuff across businesses with multiple locations where you want to coordinate it. So you could have, if you think back, we used to have on-prem, like a little mini server on every location connected up via VPN to each other. The reason people went to the cloud was the maintenance on it. And now I'm back with my Mac Mini, that most of the work I'm doing to maintain my OpenClaw is connecting things back up. Things break, like authorizations, timeout. But it's still the things I've connected to all in the cloud. So I think to be purely on-prem in the way we used to understand, with like a server on every location, they're all connected by some VPN. I don't think it allows you to take advantage of all the tools that are out there, because you can load models on that. You can have local models and things, but there's still other things you need. You still be connecting this stuff to the cloud. Your emails in the cloud and things like that.
So for an enterprise with so many moving parts that keep changing at their own pace and compatibility and all those kind of issues, when you have vibe coded or AI generated software, do you see any issues in terms of longer term maintainability or upgradability?
I think we sort of have a funny. I was in a product conversation today, and we've got two little applications that are the team has sort of vibe coded and made available, but they are tools used by developers. So they're just effectively, they've been built to scale to a team of 4 people. Do you mean? So somebody's built a tool. So we've on our SaaS platform, we've got an integration module which manages integrations and alerts to mapping issues, and somebody's built a tool that makes management of that for developers easier. Okay. And they vibe coded that up, and it's fairly niche, and it only works on our platform, and it only needs to work for a team of 4. And if it goes down, the people that are using it are pretty sharp, and they can either go back to the manual, but the way they were doing it before, and struggle on, or somebody fixes it, or fix it themselves. So I think there's a lot of there's a lot of demand for little applications like that are very small, focused on a small group of people. And if you look at the sort of stuff you might do on your Mac Mini or your agentic, Claude Code, is really you're building an application just for you, for one person. So, I think it has implications for SaaS businesses. If you're selling a product that is simple and easy to use and is used targeted for one person, you're probably going to get beaten out by agents. If you are selling something that's complex, and back to the payroll example, and connects everybody up across the whole business, then you've probably got a bit more protection.
Okay. Now, with this, how do you enable your teams to get trained or pick up what's happening and pick the right ones that would be best suited for your situation?
So I think my favorite sort of analogy on this is one of our partners. I was having breakfast with the CEO, okay, and just bear with me on this one. So he was really fed up with his he runs $100 million business out of Australia, and he was fed up with the company website, and he decided to rebuild it. So he vibe coded it over the weekend. So he's not technical, and he vibe coded it. And he went in on Monday. He said, "Right, I've had it with this website. I've now built it." And of course, some of the people in the technical and marketing team said, "Yeah, but yes, but it doesn't do this. It doesn't got that backup. It's not enterprise, ready. It's not production ready." So he took the list of what they said, and he went back and he got it to fix it. Okay, and then they had another round, and after about a week, he got this thing live. Okay, and it's now their website. And one of the things, so the question was, how do you enable people to do it? And my view is, if you're the CEO, if you're the person or the head of that department, you can buy people the tools, but actually, once they see you using them, and you've got the evidence to, this guy, Clayton, his name is, has got the evidence to say to them, "No, I don't believe that. I reckon I could get that built in a day." And now, and I've watched that organization. We're partners with them. I've watched that organization. The head of sales, he's trying to learn how to use Claude Code. Whereas he probably had, and I'm doing it a bit of disservice probably, but he might not have had any interest in doing that before. Now he is. And and if the CEO uses it and lives and breathes it, he's setting an example. It's a he in this case, and people are following. So there are methods. You can get people enabled on the tools. You can pay for the tools. You can pay for training. You can do all of those things. Okay, but I think to move the needle, the CEO, the head of the department, the C-suite, they all have to roll their sleeves up and learn how to use these tools, and then challenge their people to use them. And that's how you get adoption, in my view.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point that you make. So how does one get over the limiting belief, or call it the imposter syndrome, where, for instance, I had stopped coding almost 2 decades ago, and then I started again last year, thanks to all these vibe coding tools. But then initially it was maybe baby steps, doing some things, and then when you see something, you get back. But when someone has not been coding or has not been very technical, how do you get them to even dip their feet?
I think some I've got a few examples of people I know that are like that. And it's not everybody, but some of those people that are not technical, they're like evangelists. They're like, wow, the AI has empowered, their vibe coding has empowered them to fix problems that they never thought they were going to be able to fix. They always had to wait for engineering or technology to deliver them what they needed, and they were at the back of the queue. Now they're empowered. So for me, the beauty of this is we should be empowering everybody to do it. And like I said, my belief, having seen it in action, and I've tried it myself. I try my best to be ahead of all of the latest technology. It's not easy, but I try. And so I think once you get people that are empowered. Another thing is maybe you should only recruit people that are empowered. Or want to be empowered. There's this myth in sort of Silicon Valley, the sort of mythical one-person $1 trillion company where they're it probably will happen, but there's certainly a sort of small team of 4 or 5 that are using AI to deliver what 20 people would have done in a previous startup. So those companies are trying to only recruit people that are AI native. The sort of thing I think should be happening is, as a CEO, we should be asking all of our C-suite to vibe code. What have you vibe coded? And we should be forcing them to do it. And if they don't do it, then you've got to ask whether they're long for the business. And maybe when we're recruiting people, instead of doing a code test, you give them a vibe code test, for everybody, whether they're marketing or sales, So I think it's things like that can start to empower people and get them using it, get them to believe.
A little segue now. I'm curious about why you chose the name Solved by AI.
Uh, it's a classic that the website was available. No, um, well, I think we feel we're problem solvers, as a team, and presumably some of that comes from me. But my son's an engineer. My son runs that business, and I'm the chairman. But so he's an ex-motorsport engineer. He was at Mercedes and Bentley Motorsport, and and so he's got a problem-solving mindset. A lot of the people in the team, there is a mix of engineers, um, uh, you know, data scientists, other scientists. So yeah, I think they all see themselves as solving problems. So it just seemed to be what we did. We used AI to solve problems, and that's where the name came from.
Okay. So has there been any hesitation from your customers saying, I would rather have it solved by a human?
Yeah, I think yes, 100%. I think and we were obviously very enthusiastic and evangelistic about it, and we assumed, I'm sure every AI company's made this mistake. We assumed everybody else was just as enthusiastic and optimistic about it as we were, and they weren't always. So quite often we would get a stakeholder in a business that was equally enthusiastic, and that's why we were in there in the first place. And then when the sort of solution met the sort of end users, there might have been some resistance. So a good example was we used to call our scheduling tool auto scheduling. Okay. And we were selling it to retailers and one of our customers, we were getting pushback from the managers. And when we did a bit of surveying, what it turned out was the managers were they were a bit put out because they felt that was their job and there was a risk it was being taken out and they were no longer in charge. And now this AI was making the decisions. And two, it wasn't always perfect. So we repositioned exactly the same product as Schedule Assist. Okay. And what we said was this will do 70% of the work. You get to do the finishing touches. It's your decision and you're in charge. Okay. And then just by changing the name and relaunching it, there were a couple of little product changes to improve some of the feedback areas. But we relaunched it, surveyed again, and the acceptance ratings went up, considerably. So I think, it taught us a lesson that you can't, you have to bring people along with you. You can't just run along with your own enthusiasm, and we're doing it for what we felt for the right reasons, but we were probably clumsy and maybe a little bit arrogant when we were doing that.
Yeah, that's a great story. Because that is one thing I see, particularly with AI, there is so much emphasis on the technology part, which is a black box, that probably the psychology or the human elements are kind of less stressed.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, one of my favorite questions with all our guests is about some career tips for two segments of people. One, those who are considering a career in IT or technology-based solutions now to enter. And the second is probably those who are in their mid-career crisis or saying, what should I do? Or should I be technical? Should I become managerial? Should I be an entrepreneur? Do you have any guidance for them?
Yeah, I'm going to give them both exactly the same advice. Okay, it is for two slightly different reasons. Is they have to this AI wave is I believe it'll be positive. I believe it will generate more work, but I do believe it's going to cause a lot of disruption. There's going to be jobs that are no longer needed, but there'll be new jobs that will be needed. There are the two groups you just suggested. There's certainly in the UK, but I think a lot of places around the world, young graduates are not being hired in the same numbers because AI can take away some of those simpler jobs that we would have used that when we were younger we used to learn and develop on. Okay, and also middle managers are being pushed away, maybe in their 50s or, a bit younger than me then, but, but they're finding it hard to get re-employed. Okay. Both of them need to skill up for the current AI boom, and I think I wouldn't spend money on going on a course. I would get myself a Mac Mini and build some tools and learn how to do it, and then I would, become an evangelist. So if you go back to my job interview thing I was saying earlier about let's get everybody to do some sort of vibe coding tool. When I go for the marketing role, I've already built and run and operated and solved the problems around some of those solutions that I'm applying for using AI. And if you are, if you're 21, you can use your youth and enthusiasm and still sharp minds to solve those problems. And if you're 55, you can use your experience, but layer on that experience onto these new tools. So my advice to both is the same. Be like that CEO. Start solving the problems with the tools. Don't wait for them to come to you, and learn how to use them and be as best as you can with them.
You did give this advice of jumping in and then doing things, and you also mentioned that you also keep in touch with what's going on. With all your responsibilities, how do you find time to do that?
I never watch television.
Okay.
It's I find time. I'm either work, family, and my wife and I have the same hobbies, like we go walking or we do it, exercise together. So that seems a very efficient way of combining my hobby with spending some family time. So so I spend my time on family, bit of fitness, and work, and and maybe occasionally go to the football. But and I don't watch much television, so something has to give, because I do put I'm still working six days a week and loving it.
Good, wonderful. So with such a busy schedule, do you have any personal practices that you like to share that help you stay grounded?
Well, I suppose that presumes that you think I'm grounded, Shiv. What practices do I have to keep me grounded? No, I think probably just if I'm still grounded, it's because I just I keep I'm quite happy to roll my sleeves up and do it myself and enjoy doing it. So that wasn't me, the CEO in the story, but I did admire it and thought, that's exactly, I wish that had been me. And, I do that, maybe not to the quite same extent, but, I'm quite happy to roll my sleeves up and get things done. And I think you're then sort of stuck in the problems and in the weeds a bit. And maybe that stops me being a strategic visionary, because that's what they would always tell you at business school. But it does keep you a bit tuned in, and you can see what other people are having to deal with. And maybe that's what keeps you grounded. So that's, you stumped me there, Shiv, but that's the best answer I can give, I'm afraid.
Wonderful. No, there's no one right answer. It is whatever works for a person. So maybe a related question is about drawing either inspiration or support from a network, whether it is family or friends or peers in the industry.
Yeah, I think I've always I've got a few people that I've been that I'd say mentored me in business, and I give a shout out to a guy called Brian Mattingly, who's always sort of looked out for me and give me some good advice, and there's others as well, and then the partners in business, and then and family as well. The family is still my children. They're older now. They're having their own children now, but they're a source of inspiration. They keep you young and drive you forward. Just trying to keep up with them. So I think I try and be positive about most things, and so if you've got a sort of positive growth mindset, you can get inspiration from a lot of people, I think.
So on that very reassuring note, Ian, thanks a lot for sharing your story. I'm sure that some of the things that you have mentioned are not just theory, but these are practices. So it's definitely, I drew a lot of points from this. Staying in touch, getting down, doing things, drawing support from wherever you can.
But thanks, Shiv. I feel it was all me talking, and I'd love to hear. I want to find the podcast where somebody's done this to you and find out your story, because it feels like it's been me talking. But listen, thank you very much for listening.
Thanks a lot.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People Stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.